The Browning M2, 50 caliber heavy machine gun, affectionately known to countless servicemen as Madus, earned its distinguished moniker through unparalleled performance and longevity. When the prodigious firearms designer John Moses Browning brought his definitive version to fruition in 1921, he unwittingly forged what military historians universally acclaim as the most triumphantly engineered heavy machine gun in the annals of warfare. This formidable weapon possessed the raw power to effortlessly penetrate robust engine blocks from a remarkable distance of 500 yards, to shred light armored vehicles with terrifying efficiency, and to propel its half-inch diameter projectiles downrange at an astonishing velocity of 2,210 feet per second. By the year 1942, amidst the ferocious campaigns of the Pacific Theater, every American infantry company desperately coveted these formidable instruments of destruction, eager to acquire as many as their logistical chains could possibly supply. The sheer psychological impact alone, inflicted upon the enemy by its thunderous presence, was considered immeasurably valuable. Japanese soldiers, particularly, came to refer to it with a chilling reverence as the woodpecker of death, a macabre title inspired by its distinctively rhythmic and relentless percussive firing cadence. However, a crucial detail, often conspicuously absent from the valorizing recruiting posters, was the M2's inherent and potentially fatal vulnerability, a critical flaw that every seasoned machine gunner inevitably came to dread. While the weapon's theoretical rate of fire boasted an impressive 450 to 600 rounds per minute, practical combat applications revealed a starkly different reality. In a sustained engagement, a gun crew could realistically expect to achieve perhaps only 90 to 120 seconds of continuous firing before the immutable laws of thermodynamics transformed their most trusted combat companion into nothing more than a dangerously inert mass of overheated metal. The fundamental issue was not a scarcity of ammunition. Indeed, a well-provisioned and efficient crew could theoretically maintain a steady supply to the hungry beast for extended periods. The true insidious adversary was heat, a pervasive and inescapable problem that held the very real potential to cost a gunner his life. Each precise moment, the M2's firing pin initiated contact with a primer. It sparked the ignition of 240 grains of smokeless powder, unleashing a torrent of energy approximating 18,000 foot-pounds. While the predominant portion of this immense force was efficiently channeled into propelling the projectile forward with devastating speed, approximately 30% of this generated energy underwent an immediate conversion into thermal energy. Consequently, with every single round discharged, the barrel itself absorbed a staggering 400 foot-pounds of intense heat. To illustrate the rapid accumulation, consider the act of firing a mere 100 rounds in swift succession. This action translates to an incredible 540,000 foot-pounds of thermal energy being relentlessly pumped into a relatively slender steel tube that weighs a mere 26 pounds. We are delving deep into the technical challenges faced by soldiers wielding such powerful machinery. Stay with us to watch the end of this video for the full story. We would be truly grateful for your like and subscription. Please also consider leaving a comment below, sharing where you are from, and what your thoughts are on this fascinating topic. The underlying calculations were stark in their simplicity and brutal in their implications. Following just 2 minutes of uninterrupted firing, the barrel's temperature would inevitably surge past 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Pushing the weapon's endurance to 3 minutes of continuous operation meant flirting with temperatures exceeding 1,100 degrees. At the critical threshold of 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, the specialized steel composing the barrel would begin to compromise its fundamental structural integrity. The Army Ordnance Department was, of course, acutely aware of these limitations. The comprehensive technical manual meticulously distributed to every M2 crew contained unequivocal warnings, conspicuously emblazoned in bold lettering. Sustained fire exceeding 2 minutes will result in barrel failure. The repercussions of disregarding this explicit directive spanned a perilous spectrum, ranging from merely detrimental to utterly catastrophic. In the most favorable, albeit still undesirable scenario, the barrel would suffer a slight warping, leading to a dramatic degradation of accuracy. Projectiles would then begin to keyhole, tumbling erratically sideways through the air, instead of maintaining a precise, stable trajectory. The gravest outcome involved the actual rupture of the barrel, a violent event that could propel shrapnel back towards the gunner's face, thereby rendering the formidable weapon permanently inoperable. Occupying the perilous middle ground on this scale of disaster was the expansion of the headspace, that critically engineered gap between the bolt face and the barrel, caused by thermal deformation. This expansion could tragically lead to rounds detonating prematurely within the chamber, a phenomenon gunsmiths termed a cook-off, capable of instantly transforming a controlled weapon into a dangerously unpredictable instrument. To counteract this inherent operational constraint, standard military doctrine directly confronted the issue. It mandated that every M2 position be equipped with a readily accessible spare barrel and that its crew be rigorously trained in the precise barrel change procedure. The directive was clear: swap the barrel approximately every 90 seconds. By allowing the superheated barrel to cool for a period of 20 minutes, a crew could theoretically sustain an indefinite rate of fire. The barrel change itself, if executed by a proficient crew, typically required about 30 to 45 seconds, though this duration could extend to 60 seconds when operating in the dark or under intense enemy fire. The Army even issued specialized asbestos gloves specifically designed for handling these searing hot barrels, although many crews found them excessively bulky and opted instead for improvisations using rags or the sleeves of their uniforms. Crucially, however, all these elaborate protocols hinged upon one fundamental assumption: that the tactical situation would permit a pause in the relentless act of shooting. Guadalcanal, in the pivotal month of November 1942, became the crucible where the imperial forces of Japan sought to definitively test the resolve of American forces and ultimately drive them back into the vast expanse of the sea. This island, an expanse roughly 90 miles long and 25 miles wide, had ascended to become the absolute focal point of the entire Pacific War, following the initial Marine landings on August 7th. By November, the brutal conflict had devolved into a grinding, desperate stalemate, with all efforts concentrated around Henderson Field, the sole operational airstrip situated within the Solomon Islands archipelago. The strategic axiom was undeniable: whoever commanded that crucial airstrip would command the skies, and whoever commanded the skies would ultimately claim victory in the Pacific. The Marines had painstakingly established a defensive perimeter encircling Henderson Field, but this vital line was dangerously attenuated, stretched to its absolute limits. The 1st Marine Division had endured 3 months of continuous, grueling combat, sustaining daily casualties, with reinforcements arriving at a significantly slower pace than men were falling in battle. On the somber night of November 12th, intelligence dispatches indicated the imminent arrival of a major Japanese offensive. The reports, as it turned out, were entirely accurate. What these initial assessments tragically failed to convey, however, was the sheer, overwhelming scale of the impending assault. This was not to be a mere probing attack or a harassing maneuver designed to test defenses. Imperial General Headquarters had committed the entirety of the 38th Infantry Division, a formidable force comprised of fresh, well-trained troops directly from Japan, with unequivocal orders to breach the American lines and reclaim Henderson Field at any conceivable cost. Marine Corporal Anthony Stein, affectionately known to his squad as Tony, held a crucial defensive position on what topographical maps designated as Hill 132, although everyone on the ground simply referred to it as Henderson Ridge. This elevated ridge formed a formidable natural impediment on the southern approach leading directly to the vital airfield, rising approximately 50 feet above the surrounding dense jungle. Stein's formidable M2 .50 caliber machine gun was meticulously positioned to cover a draw, a natural funnel-like corridor situated between two higher hills where the vegetation thinned out just enough to create a devastating kill zone stretching about 80 yards deep and 40 yards wide. Military strategists would later analyze this as a textbook defensive arrangement. However, Stein himself grimly characterized it as a death trap, for if the Japanese forces were to surge through that draw in significant numbers, his three-man gun crew would represent the sole, fragile barrier preventing them from completely overwhelming the entire right flank of the American defenses. The relentless assault commenced precisely at 02:30 hours on November 13th. There was no preceding artillery preparation, no discernible warning, merely ominous shapes materializing and moving with chilling purpose in the profound darkness. There were many of them, advancing with the kind of disciplined precision that is only forged in professional soldiers who have trained together for countless years. The 38th Division was by no means a contingent of green, inexperienced troops. These men possessed considerable combat experience, having honed their skills in the brutal campaigns of Manchuria and China. They knew their grim business intimately. Stein's vigilant assistant gunner, Private Eddie Morrison, was the first to discern their presence through the gloom, estimating at least 200 men forming up within the tree line, possibly even more. They were equipped with Bangalore torpedoes, specifically designed to breach defensive wire obstacles, scaling ladders to surmount defensive trenches, and a prodigious quantity of small arms ammunition, sufficient to sustain a protracted assault for many hours. The relentless engagement stretched into an indefinite period of intense combat. It was in this crucible of fire and steel that the tactical equation confronting Anthony Stein took a grim turn. Established military doctrine for defensive machine gun operations stipulated the deployment of short, meticulously controlled bursts, typically comprising 5 to 7 rounds, followed by a brief lull for assessment. This conservative approach was designed to husband precious ordnance, mitigate thermal stress on the weapons components, and preserve the machine gun's operational reliability. However, Stein, with his keen understanding of the unfolding battle, immediately grasped that the prevailing circumstances demanded a radical departure from these prescribed guidelines. The enemy forces, specifically the Japanese, were demonstrably massing for a human wave assault, a notoriously brutal tactic characterized by an unyielding advance regardless of the casualties incurred, continuing until either the defensive line fractured or the attacking force was utterly depleted. Should Stein adhere to the conventional short-burst firing regimen, a sufficient number of Japanese soldiers would undoubtedly survive the lethal crossfire to breach his kill zone and subsequently overrun his strategically vital position. Once past his formidable weapon, these enemy combatants would find themselves behind the primary defensive line, with only isolated pockets of infantry resistance standing between them and the critical airfield. Stein, in his desperate assessment, recognized the profound imbalance in his resources. His operational guidelines permitted him the use of 2 reserve barrels. Adhering strictly to prescribed operational guidelines, this provision afforded him a mere 6 minutes of cumulative operational duration, distributed across a half-hour engagement, meticulously accounting for the time required for barrel changes and the necessary cooling periods. His diligent loader, Private First Class Jack Chen, had 12 robust ammunition containers stacked within arm's reach, presenting a readily accessible supply of 600 rounds, with additional support personnel poised for immediate resupply. Thus, the supply of ordnance was not the immediate concern. The critical resource in short supply was the operational window itself. Stein was acutely aware that he faced an overwhelming assault force that would necessitate at least 8 to 10 minutes of uninterrupted suppressive barrages to effectively halt their advance. The stark disparity between his available firing time and the required duration of sustained fire presented a dire predicament. The intricate engineering behind the M2 barrels, primarily fabricated by the skilled artisans at Colt's Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company during the tumultuous years of World War II, relied upon a specialized steel alloy identified as SAE 4150. This particular chromium-molybdenum steel was selected precisely for its inherent capacity to endure successive cycles of extreme heating and cooling, thereby preserving its inherent robustness and structural integrity under immense operational pressures. At ambient room temperature, SAE 4150 exhibited an impressive tensile strength of approximately 125,000 pounds per square inch, signifying its resistance to fracture under tension. The meticulous manufacturing process commenced with the precise boring of a cylindrical hole through a solid block of steel, a technique known as gun drilling, followed by the careful engraving of helical grooves along the bore's inner surface, known as rifling. Specifically 4 grooves with a right-hand twist of 1 turn in 15 inches. The completed barrel then underwent a rigorous thermomechanical conditioning procedure involving heating to a scorching 1,550 degree OAF, followed by rapid cooling in an oil bath, and subsequently tempered at 800 degree. This precise treatment endowed the barrel with a specific hardness rating of Rockwell C28-32, optimizing its durability and performance. We invite you to stay with us and watch the end of the video for the full story. We would be grateful for your like and subscription. Please feel free to leave a comment below about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. It was at this juncture that the intricate principles of material science transitioned from academic theory to a stark reality of survival, with life and death hanging in the balance. The meticulously executed heat treatment process imparted a unique internal crystalline arrangement or microstructure to the steel, enabling it to manage the strain induced by heat up to a certain critical threshold. However, it is an immutable law of metallurgy that steel's mechanical properties diminish along a discernible trajectory as its temperature ascends. For instance, at 600 degree F, SAE 4150 steel remarkably maintained approximately 9/10 of its ambient temperature robustness. Yet at 900 degree F, its strength plummeted to 70% of its original capacity. By 1100 degree F, the material had suffered a 50% reduction in its load-bearing capacity. And tragically, at 1200 degree IF, a temperature that M2 barrels routinely attained after a mere 150 to 180 seconds of uninterrupted suppressive fire, the steel retained only 40% of its original tensile strength. Visually, the barrel might still appear as a solid, unaltered metallic component, yet it was fundamentally weakened in its integrity, structurally compromised in ways that could unfold with sudden and devastating consequences. The manifestations of impending failure were diverse, yet experienced gunners invariably learned to recognize the precursory indicators. The initial symptom was a marked decline in precision, known as accuracy degradation. As the barrel underwent thermal expansion due to intense heat, the helical channels within the bore subtly enlarged on a microscopic level, causing the projectile to lose its vital gyroscopic stability upon exiting the muzzle. Rounds that were expected to impact within a tight 6-inch diameter at 100 yards began dispersing across an 18 or 24-inch spread. Moreover, tracer rounds, which constituted every fifth projectile in standard M2 ammunition belts, started etching erratic, arcing trajectories through the air instead of maintaining their characteristic straight flight paths. Astute gunners monitored their tracer rounds with utmost vigilance, understanding their critical role as visual diagnostics. When these illuminated projectiles began exhibiting an uncontrolled helical flight path, it signaled a precarious window of perhaps 20 seconds before critical malfunctions commenced. Following the accuracy degradation, the critical concern of headspace tolerance emerged, and this is where the situation escalated rapidly into perilous territory. Headspace on an M2 machine gun was defined as the precise clearance separating the breech bolt's surface from the rear of the chambered round, ideally calibrated to the exact specification of 0.063 inches, a dimension roughly equivalent to the combined breadth of 2 standard paper sheets. As the barrel heated and underwent thermal expansion, that crucial gap inevitably broadened. If this clearance exceeded its safe operational tolerance, the metallic casing of the round would lack adequate structural reinforcement when the firing pin struck. Consequently, the primer would ignite, pressure would rapidly build within the cartridge, and the unsupported brass case would catastrophically fail or rupture. In some instances, this merely resulted in malfunctions in spent casing removal and weapon blockages. However, in more severe cases, it meant superheated propellant gases and shattered metallic shards ejecting rearward through the receiver, directly into the gunner's face, causing severe injury. The most dire potential outcome was an uncontrolled thermal acceleration, commonly known as a cook-off. At extreme operational temperatures, the firing chamber itself attained a temperature sufficient to initiate the combustion of the propellant within a chambered round, without the firing pin ever striking the primer. This uncommanded ignition would discharge the round, automatically chamber the next one, which would also cook off, creating a runaway gun that fired uncontrollably without operator input or cessation until its supply of ammunition was exhausted. Such a terrifying event could not be halted by conventional means, the firing mechanism's activation became moot. The sole desperate option available to the gunner was to sever the continuous feed of cartridges, to break the ammunition belt. Yet, in the throes of active combat, such an action might not be practicable or without peril. Official Marine Corps post-engagement analyses from the Guadalcanal campaign meticulously recorded 23 distinct occurrences of M2 barrel failures during the initial 3 months of fighting. 7 of these incidents resulted in total structural disintegrations of the barrel, and 4 caused grave harm inflicted upon the weapon operators. In one notably tragic event, on October 8, 1942, a cook-off killed a corporal from the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, when the runaway gun pivoted unexpectedly on its mounting and discharged projectiles indiscriminately across friendly lines, tragically sweeping rounds across his own position. Anthony Peter Stein, on November 13, 1942, was 23 years old, a relatively advanced age that positioned him among the more seasoned individuals within his unit. His formative years were spent in Dayton, Ohio, where his father distinguished himself as a master craftsman, specializing in precision tooling at the esteemed National Cash Register Company. Tony, following his father's vocational path, dedicated 3 years to learning the meticulous fabrication of metal components before the global conflict erupted. This pre-war occupational background held a significance far beyond contemporary appreciation. For Stein possessed an innate comprehension of mechanical principles that most young men of his age simply did not. He intrinsically understood how metallic substances behaved when subjected to extreme forces, had witnessed steel deform under thermal influence, observed dimensional allowances alter as parts underwent thermal enlargement, and crucially, had learned how to operate effectively despite or in adaptation to those inherent constraints. Stein had volunteered for service in the United States Marine Corps in January 1942, subsequently completing rigorous basic training at Parris Island before being designated for deployment with the 1st Marine Division as a machine gunner. The Corps, recognizing his innate proficiency with machinery, specifically assigned him to operate the M2 Browning heavy machine gun. The non-commissioned officer in charge of the heavy weapons section, upon reviewing Stein's pre-service occupational background, succinctly declared, "You're on the 50." By November of that year, he had discharged around 8,000 projectiles through a range of M2 Browning heavy machine guns during both training exercises and active combat. Consequently, he understood the weapon's peculiar operational characteristics, its inherent advantages, and its inherent boundaries with a familiarity surpassing that of his personal service rifle. Now he stood vigilantly behind that formidable weapon, observing enemy silhouettes burgeoning in the nocturnal gloom, his mind engaged in complex computations dictated not by bravery, but by the stark, unforgiving principles of numerical reality. The lethal engagement area directly ahead of his fortified post stretched for an estimated 80 yards in depth. Japanese ground forces, advancing with a deliberate tactical gait across the challenging, fragmented landscape, were projected to traverse this critical expanse in an interval of roughly 90 to 120 seconds. However, their approach was not anticipated as a singular, unified surge. Stein's keen observation revealed the methodical formation of numerous distinct lines. Established Japanese offensive strategy dictated the deployment of sequential echelons, each separated by an interval of approximately 20 yards. This predetermined separation implied that even if the initial wave were successfully repelled, a subsequent assault would materialize a mere 30 seconds thereafter, followed by a third and then a fourth, creating a relentless, cascading pressure. Morrison, functioning as his indispensable assistant gunner, had meticulously tallied no fewer than 200 enemy combatants gathered within the staging zone, with a more precise estimate leaning towards 250. Given the characteristic structure of Japanese infantry units, which typically comprised 13-man sections, this indicated the presence of approximately 18 to 20 such formations, poised for an offensive. It was understood that not the entirety of this force would funnel through Stein's designated kill zone. A portion would undoubtedly target adjacent sectors of the defensive line. Nevertheless, a conservative projection suggested that at least half, translating to a formidable contingent of 100 to 125 adversaries, would converge upon their position. These individuals absolutely had to be neutralized at this precise juncture, or a catastrophic breach of the defenses was inevitable. The M2 heavy machine gun possessed a formidable rate of fire, capable of expending between 450 and 600 rounds per minute, contingent upon the operator's manipulation of the trigger mechanism. Stein, in the crucible of engagement, customarily maintained an operational tempo of approximately 500 rounds per minute. While this did not represent the weapon's utmost cyclic capacity, it proved sufficiently rapid to achieve decisive impact. To neutralize a contingent of 100 adversaries, predicated on the assumption that each individual would necessitate an average expenditure of 4 to 5 rounds to ensure either a fatality or a debilitating injury, he would need to deliver roughly 400 to 500 projectiles towards the target area. At his established rate of 500 rounds per minute, this translated into a sustained period of 50 to 60 seconds of active trigger engagement. However, such a calculation rested on the entirely unrealistic premise of impeccable accuracy and the complete absence of return fire, a scenario utterly divorced from the brutal realities of combat. Genuine battlefield exigencies invariably demanded at least double that volume, perhaps a grand total of 800 to 1,000 rounds, to compensate for errant shots, the necessity of suppressive fire, and the stark fact that enemy combatants seldom succumb to a solitary impact. We invite you to remain with us and witness the culmination of this compelling narrative as we approach the conclusion of the video. Your appreciation, signified by a simple like, and your subscription to our channel would be profoundly valued. Please also share in the comments below where you are tuning in from and your personal reflections on the critical topic discussed in this presentation. The grim arithmetic continued its relentless deterioration. An expenditure of 800 rounds, discharged at a rate of 500 rounds per minute, translated directly to 96 seconds of continuous suppressive fire. Incorporating the requisite time to articulate the weapon, sweeping it across the full breadth of the kill zone to engage disparate targets, extended this minimum engagement period to at least 2 minutes. Yet, the Japanese offensive was not a singular rush, but a series of successive echelons. The entire assault was anticipated to persist for a minimum of 5 minutes, from the initial hostile contact until the last enemy combatant was either neutralized or repelled. To sustain a credible volume of fire across this entire 5-minute duration, even factoring in the necessary barrel exchanges, Stein would realistically need to operate the weapon for a cumulative period of approximately 8 to 10 minutes. He possessed a complement of 3 barrels. established operational protocols typically allotted for 6 minutes of active firing time distributed over a 30-minute interval. Consequently, he faced a critical deficit of at least 2 minutes, and quite possibly 4 minutes, should circumstances devolve, a frequent and unfortunate reality in the chaos of battle. Stein arrived at his critical determination in a mere 5 seconds, the absolute maximum time afforded to him before the vanguard of the Japanese force initiated its advance. The subsequent action he undertook represented a radical contravention of every technical manual, every established regulation, and every fragment of official doctrine meticulously compiled by the Marine Corps pertaining to the M2 Browning machine gun. Nevertheless, his bold improvisation was firmly rooted in robust thermodynamic principles, concepts readily grasped by any skilled machinist, even though the mere proposal of such a method would have assuredly resulted in court-martial proceedings initiated by any commissioned officer within the Corps. The fundamental principle underpinning his solution was evaporative cooling. This phenomenon leverages the identical physical laws responsible for the sensation of chill one experiences upon emerging from a swimming pool on a blustery day. When liquid water undergoes a transformation into vapor, it assimilates a prodigious quantity of energy, specifically around 540 calories per gram, at standard sea-level atmospheric pressure. This intrinsic property, known as the latent heat of vaporization, precisely elucidates why perspiration functions as an effective thermoregulatory system for the human body, and why the application of water to scorching pavement elicits a distinctive, sizzling, audible response. By introducing a liquid onto a metal surface elevated to extreme temperatures, an exceptionally potent mechanism for thermal energy exchange is established. The liquid actively draws heat from the metallic component, undergoes a phase change into steam, and subsequently transports that thermal energy away, dissipating it into the ambient atmosphere. By the year 1942, various industrial machining processes had routinely incorporated liquid cooling methods for many decades. Precision cutting tools, high-speed drill bits, and intricate milling machines all relied upon a continuous circulation of coolant to avert detrimental thermal degradation. While the standard coolant typically comprised a blend of water and soluble oil, in exigent circumstances, unadulterated water proved perfectly adequate. Stein's understanding of these principles stemmed directly from his tenure at National Cash Register. He had personally witnessed the dire repercussions when coolant pumps malfunctioned. Tools rapidly succumbed to extreme overheating and failed within a matter of moments. Furthermore, he had observed skilled machinists ingeniously improvising makeshift emergency cooling apparatuses, utilizing any available liquid, which often included highly unconventional solutions that would, without question, never be documented in any official operational guide. The principal impediment to effectively cooling an M2 barrel amidst the intensity of combat boiled down to straightforward logistical hurdles. One critically required a liquid, and crucially, it had to be both instantaneously accessible and available in substantial volume. From a purely thermodynamic perspective, water presented the optimal medium. However, on the arduous terrain of Guadalcanal, water was an extraordinarily precious commodity. Canteens were allocated strictly for hydration, not for the profligate expenditure on weaponry. Attempting to transport dedicated water containers to a forward fighting emplacement solely for the purpose of cooling a machine gun barrel would inevitably entail an arduous and exhaustive justification process, extending from the immediate command structure all the way to division headquarters. Moreover, during the chaos of a nocturnal assault, one was compelled to utilize whatever resources were directly within arm's reach. In Stein's immediate vicinity, the only consistently available liquid was urine, his own, that of Morrison, Chen, and indeed any other Marine positioned nearby. The physiological composition of human urine consists of approximately 95% water, with the residual 5% comprising various dissolved organic and inorganic compounds, including urea, creatinine, uric acid, and a spectrum of salts. From the standpoint of thermal energy transfer, its efficacy closely approximates that of unadulterated water. Intriguingly, the presence of these dissolved solutes marginally elevates its boiling point. Whereas pure water reaches its boiling threshold at 212 degree IF, urine typically boils in the range of 214 degree to 215 degree F. However, when confronted with barrel temperatures soaring beyond 100 degree IF, this minimal 2-degree differential became utterly inconsequential. The liquid, irrespective of its precise boiling point, would instantaneously convert to steam under such extreme heat. The specific chemical constituents of urine did, however, introduce several potential complexities. Urea, for instance, undergoes decomposition at elevated temperatures, fragmenting into ammonia and carbon dioxide, a reaction that would undoubtedly generate a pronouncedly disagreeable odor during the cooling process. Furthermore, the dissolved salts present within the liquid posed a theoretical risk of precipitating residue deposits within the barrel's interior. Although at the extreme temperatures encountered, the majority of organic compounds would simply undergo combustion. The uric acid component, in particular, could potentially instigate minor corrosive damage. Yet, such long-term maintenance concerns were relegated to the future. They constituted a problem for tomorrow. The immediate and overriding imperative of the present moment was unequivocally to maintain the barrel at a sufficiently low temperature to sustain effective suppressive fire. Explicit directives within the Marine Corps' regulations strictly forbade the very action Stein was poised to undertake, although the precise formulation of this prohibition was somewhat obscurely situated within Technical Manual TM 9-1052-213, specifically under the heading designated Unauthorized Cooling Methods. The manual unequivocally declared, under no circumstances should gunners attempt to cool barrels using non-approved liquids, including seawater, alcohol, petroleum products, or bodily fluids. Such practices may cause permanent damage to barrel surfaces and create unsafe operating conditions. This particular regulation had been instituted as a direct consequence of lessons painfully acquired in preceding conflicts, where the military had observed that soldiers, driven by sheer desperation, would resort to virtually any expedient. Regrettably, some of these improvised methods had demonstrably exacerbated rather than alleviated critical situations. Stein, however, harbored no concern for such bureaucratic injunctions. His singular focus rested upon the undeniable realities of mathematics, the immutable laws of physics, and the immediate overwhelming threat posed by the 200 Japanese soldiers who were moments away from surging towards his defensive post. The intense engagement commenced as the enemy sought to rush his fortified position. The initial volley erupted precisely at 02:37 hours, a devastating discharge of 35 rounds that tore through the leading Japanese detachment with the brutal efficiency of a saw rending through pliant bamboo. Corporal Stein operated the weapon's trigger with practiced precision, allowing his honed muscle memory to expertly guide the traversing and elevation mechanisms, even as his mind wrestled with a more pressing tactical concern. He estimated he had a mere 90 seconds before the weapon's barrel would necessitate replacement. Private First Class Morrison, anticipating the critical juncture, had already positioned an empty ammunition can adjacent to the heavy machine gun, a silent testament to the unconventional procedure they were about to execute. Both Morrison and Private Chen were fully aware of the imminent action. Having received Stein's concise, whispered instructions, a briefing delivered in approximately 15 seconds that likely transgressed several articles of military justice, yet was vital for their survival. The Japanese forces pressed their advance relentlessly, their momentum unwavering. Such was the grim reality of a night assault. Once committed, there was no possibility of recall. Even as the initial wave's survivors scattered or fell, the second wave was already surging forward, ensuring an uninterrupted onslaught. Stein continued to unleash another 40 rounds into the dense mass of advancing enemy soldiers, meticulously walking his fire from the left flank to the right, across the designated kill zone. The muzzle flash, an incandescent bloom in the oppressive darkness, momentarily obliterated his night vision, but simultaneously illuminated individual targets with perfect, albeit fleeting clarity, for half-second intervals. Within those stark flashes, he could discern faces, youthful visages etched with grim determination, others contorted by apprehension. Despite the harrowing psychological impact, he persisted in his relentless firing, understanding that the lives of his comrades depended on his unwavering resolve. At the critical mark of 92 seconds, the weapon's barrel was rapidly approaching an excessive temperature. Stein could distinctly perceive the intense heat emanating from the heavy machine gun, even through the protective layers of his standard firing position. The tracers, once a straight path of incandescent light, now began to spiral slightly, a distinctive indicator that the rifling within the barrel was losing its effective grip on the rapidly propelled bullets. Over the cacophony of the gun's hammering, he bellowed, "Barrel!" Private First Class Morrison, already poised for the critical maneuver, had his hands firmly on the barrel release mechanism. The conventional barrel change procedure mandated that the gunner first lift the barrel locking pin, then rotate it 90 degrees, and finally withdraw the barrel to the rear. Morrison, having meticulously rehearsed this sequence approximately 1,000 times during training, executed it with swift precision, completing the entire process in a remarkable 12 seconds. We invite you to stay with us and watch the conclusion of this compelling narrative. Your like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. Please feel free to leave a comment below, sharing where you are from and what you think about the remarkable ingenuity and courage displayed in this video's topic. Private Chen stood prepared, not with a full ammunition can, but with an empty one. Corporal Stein promptly seized the scorching barrel from Morrison, holding it horizontally, while Chen poured the contents of the can directly onto the superheated steel. The ensuing effect was both instantaneous and profoundly dramatic. The liquid, upon contact with metal heated to temperatures somewhere north of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, converted to steam with such rapidity that it produced a distinct sound, reminiscent of a pressure cooker vigorously venting. The billowing cloud of vapor that erupted from the barrel was thick and opaque white and possessed a pungent odor that was precisely as one might anticipate. Stein methodically rotated the barrel, allowing Chen to saturate every side, thereby guaranteeing uniform cooling. This entire unconventional process transpired in perhaps 8 seconds. Steam was still visibly rising from the barrel when Morrison expertly slammed the fresh barrel into place and securely locked it down. The total downtime for the weapon was an astonishingly brief 20 seconds. Stein was immediately back on the trigger, resuming his engagement with the relentless second wave of Japanese soldiers who had utilized those precious 20 seconds of weapon downtime to advance considerably, now being approximately 15 yards closer to their position. He expended another 80 rounds, observing the Japanese ranks thin under the sustained fire, but notably fail to break formation. Their commitment was unwavering. It was highly probable that their command had instilled in them the belief that this was the decisive assault, the one destined to retake Henderson Field and fundamentally alter the trajectory of the war. Their conviction was profound enough to compel them to keep coming, despite the devastating casualties. The atmosphere at the gun position was permeated by an abominable stench. Ammonia, originating from the decomposing urea used in the improvised cooling liquid, intermingled with the acrid cordite smoke and the metallic tang of vaporized steel, creating a pervasive environment that would undoubtedly nauseate anyone not utterly preoccupied with the desperate struggle for survival. Stein's eyes were lachrymose, a physiological response partly due to the intense chemical assault upon his olfactory senses, and partly from the combined irritation of smoke and the continuous muzzle flash. Yet, he remained indifferent to the discomfort. The gun was still firing, still putting rounds on target, and that, quite literally, was the primary imperative that eclipsed all other sensations and concerns. 4 minutes into the protracted engagement, Stein was already performing his second barrel change. The first barrel, having been cooled and resting for 3 minutes, was now ready to re-enter service. Chen, as a precautionary measure, hit it with another round of liquid cooling, producing yet another cloud of steam that momentarily shrouded the entire gun position. The Japanese forces, witnessing these peculiar steam clouds erupting from the American lines, must have been baffled, left to wonder what unconventional weapon the Americans had deployed against them. The entire engagement lasted a staggering 9 minutes and 40 seconds from the very first shot to the last. During this period, Stein expended a total of 847 rounds, systematically rotating through his 3 barrels for 4 complete cycles, with Chen performing the emergency cooling procedure on each barrel twice. Remarkably, the heavy machine gun never jammed, never misfired, and never failed, a testament to their improvised but impeccably executed system. When the last Japanese soldier either fell or withdrew back into the concealing jungle darkness, Corporal Stein's hands were trembling so uncontrollably that he found himself unable to ignite a cigarette. Private First Class Morrison had to perform the simple task for him. 6 hours later, dawn broke, unveiling the grim reality of what they had accomplished. Bodies were stacked in overlapping rows across the entire kill zone, densest at approximately 40 yards out, precisely where the second and third waves of the assault had collided with the casualties of the first wave. the Division Graves Registration Detachment meticulously spent 2 full days cataloging the dead directly in front of Stein's position. The official count confirmed 73 enemy soldiers killed in action, unquestionably attributable to the M2 heavy machine gun position on Henderson Ridge. An additional 15 to 20 probable kills were also noted, indicated by blood trails leading back into the jungle, though no bodies were recovered for those specific instances. Captured Japanese soldiers from the 38th Division later reported during interrogations that their officers had specifically designated Stein's gun position as the vulnerable point, fully expecting to overwhelm it through sheer numerical superiority. They had been gravely mistaken. Lieutenant Colonel Lewis Puller, commanding the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, walked the position at 0800 hours. Puller was already a renowned figure within the Corps, distinguished by 2 Navy Crosses, a formidable reputation for unparalleled bravery, and a command style that judiciously mixed stringent professionalism with a complete disregard for anything that did not directly contribute to winning battles. He scrutinized the body count, then observed Stein's gun, and finally fixed his gaze upon the empty ammunition can sitting next to the position. One of them still contained remnants of liquid pooled in the bottom. Puller, with a characteristic lack of ceremony, stuck his finger in it, sniffed it, and then uttered a phrase that has since appeared in at least 6 different versions across various historical accounts. The printable version records him as saying, "Corporal, what in the name of God is this?" Stein lucidly explained everything: the intricate thermal calculations, the innovative evaporative cooling principle, and the emergency barrel cooling procedure that had sustained the gun's firing for nearly 10 minutes straight. Puller listened intently, his face completely neutral and unflappable, while Morrison and Chen stood rigidly at attention, silently bracing themselves for the imminent prospect of arrest. Upon the completion of Corporal Stein's remarkable action, Colonel Lewis Chesty Puller approached the M2 heavy machine gun, its barrel still firmly affixed to the weapon's chassis. As he carefully ran his hand along its length, a significant observation emerged. Despite visible signs of heat-induced discoloration and superficial staining on its exterior, the barrel exhibited no indications of bending, twisting, or any form of structural compromise. Crucially, there were no telltale signs of the catastrophic mechanical failure that, according to established military doctrine and engineering principles, should have inevitably transpired under such extreme conditions. The precise sequence of events following this discovery remains a subject of varying historical accounts. Some narratives suggest that Colonel Puller, deeply impressed by Stein's ingenuity and bravery, immediately initiated the process to award him a Silver Star. Conversely, other reports indicate that Puller instead authored a detailed, formal report, a crucial document that subsequently prompted a comprehensive investigation by the Division Ordnance Unit, responsible for all weaponry and material. What is, however, officially corroborated within the meticulously maintained records of the 1st Marine Division is Puller's submission on November 15th, 1942. This commendation report specifically lauded Corporal Stein for his extraordinary initiative and technical innovation under combat conditions. This pivotal commendation then progressed through the military's hierarchical structure, initially culminating in a recommendation for a Bronze Star, an honor that was ultimately elevated to a Silver Star by the direct intervention and personal endorsement of Major General Alexander Vandergrift, a testament to the profound impact of Stein's actions. Despite the commendation, the broader Marine Corps establishment found itself in a state of profound institutional consternation and dismay. The unconventional nature of Stein's method presented a significant challenge to deeply ingrained military protocols. Consequently, within a mere 7 days of the incident, Corporal Stein received an urgent summons to division headquarters. There, he was directed to replicate and demonstrate his improvised barrel cooling technique before a distinguished panel of officers. This panel comprised 2 highly ranked lieutenant colonels from the Ordnance Department, specialists in military hardware and maintenance, alongside a major representing the Judge Advocate General's JAG office, the branch responsible for military law. The JAG officer, with an air of stern authority, unequivocally articulated that any unauthorized alterations or deviations from established weapons procedures constituted a direct violation of Article 92 of the Articles of War. This specific article pertains to the grave offense of failure to obey lawful orders or regulations. The potential repercussions for such a transgression were severe and wide-ranging, extending from a demotion in military rank to the most ignominious outcome of a dishonorable discharge, with the precise penalty determined by the specific situational context and the discretionary judgment of the commanding officers involved. We invite you to remain with us as this fascinating narrative unfolds, ensuring you catch the full conclusion of this video. Your support, through a simple like and subscription, would be profoundly appreciated. Furthermore, we encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments section below, letting us know where you are viewing from and what your perspective is on the compelling subject matter discussed. The ordnance officers, however, maintained a pragmatic and investigative focus, exhibiting a keen desire for precise, empirical details rather than immediate judgment. To facilitate a thorough examination, they arrived equipped with a dedicated demonstration, 2 machine gun, a specialized chronograph designed to accurately measure muzzle velocity, and a substantial supply of ammunition to conduct rigorous, real-world firing tests. They then instructed Corporal Stein to meticulously repeat his unique cooling procedure a total of 6 times, during which they meticulously recorded critical metrics, such as barrel temperature, the exact timing of the cooling process, and its overall effectiveness. The comprehensive findings derived from this November 1942 demonstration were subsequently classified as restricted and formally documented within Ordnance Report 0421-73, a sensitive file that remained inaccessible to the public until its eventual declassification in 1967. The revelations contained within these test results were nothing short of revolutionary, directly challenging and ultimately contradicting over 2 decades of established military doctrine regarding barrel cooling methodologies. Utilizing advanced thermocouple probes for precise thermal measurement, the ordnance specialists observed that a machine gun barrel, heated to an extreme temperature of 1050 degree F, experienced a dramatic temperature reduction to 680 degree F in approximately 15 seconds when subjected to Stein's innovative liquid cooling technique. In stark contrast, attempting to cool that identical barrel from 150 degree F to 680 degree F purely through conventional air cooling methods required a staggering 7 minutes and 20 seconds. This empirical data unequivocally demonstrated that Stein's liquid-based cooling method was, astoundingly, approximately 29 times more efficient and rapid than standard protocols. The subsequent chemical analysis of the process yielded a complex and somewhat ambiguous set of results. On the one hand, it was confirmed that the decomposition of urea, a key component of the improvised coolant, produced ammonia vapor. This gaseous byproduct was not only highly unpleasant due to its pungent odor, but also presented a tangible health hazard, particularly if deployed in confined or poorly ventilated environments. Furthermore, the dissolved salts present in the liquid left behind microscopic residue within the barrel's rifling, raising theoretical concerns that repeated applications could potentially diminish the weapon's long-term accuracy. However, despite these drawbacks, the most critical findings were overwhelmingly positive. The tested barrels demonstrated no signs of warping, exhibited no cracks, and crucially, suffered no structural failures whatsoever. It was acknowledged that the extremely rapid temperature reduction inherent in Stein's method induced a significant thermal shock, causing a sudden and intense contraction of the steel. Yet, the robust SAE 4150 chromium molybdenum steel, specifically engineered for durability and heat resistance in high-stress applications, proved remarkably resilient, demonstrating ample capacity to withstand these extreme thermal stresses without compromise. After undergoing a rigorous series of 6 complete cooling cycles, the test barrel displayed an additional 0.3 inches of measurable wear, beyond what would be considered normal degradation from standard firing. Importantly, this incremental wear remained well within the acceptable operational tolerances established for such weaponry. The Marine Corps now found itself grappling with a profound institutional dilemma, caught between protocol and practicality. Officially sanctioning the act of urinating on machine guns was an untenable proposition. The public perception, or optics, of such a directive would be disastrous, potentially inviting widespread ridicule and undermining the professional image of the armed forces. Moreover, the genuine health and safety concerns associated with handling human waste and its chemical byproducts were undeniable. One could scarcely imagine the incredulity and difficulty of attempting to justify or explain such an unconventional procedure to members of Congress during highly scrutinized appropriations hearings, where funding for military operations was debated. Yet, despite these significant reservations, the Corps could not, in good conscience, simply disregard the undeniable and empirically proven results. Corporal Stein had, through sheer desperation and inventive thinking, accomplished a feat deemed impossible by every existing technical manual and engineering specification. He had enabled sustained machine gun fire that far surpassed the weapon's theoretical operational limits, all without incurring the anticipated catastrophic mechanical failure. The resolution to this complex predicament was characteristically bureaucratic and pragmatic. While the Marine Corps refrained from officially endorsing or integrating the method into standard operating procedures, it also notably chose not to pursue disciplinary action or court-martial against Corporal Stein, effectively navigating a delicate balance between upholding regulations and acknowledging battlefield innovation. The peculiar incident, though not officially sanctioned, was subtly acknowledged within subsequent training materials. It was presented as a cautionary yet illustrative example of unauthorized field modifications that, while demonstrably effective under highly specific and dire combat conditions, remained strictly prohibited under the established standard operating procedures. The more substantial and lasting impact of Stein's ingenuity was a fundamental shift in military doctrine concerning the provision and rapid replacement of spare machine gun barrels. Prior to the intense engagements on Guadalcanal, the typical M2 machine gun position was usually equipped with only a single spare barrel. However, in the aftermath of the Guadalcanal campaign, and undoubtedly influenced by experiences like Stein's, the logistical standard was significantly elevated, mandating a minimum of 2 spare barrels, and ideally 3 whenever supply chain logistics permitted. Concurrently, the emphasis on the speed and efficiency of barrel-changing procedures intensified dramatically across all training regimens. Training cycles that had previously dedicated a mere 2 hours to barrel-changing drills were substantially expanded to an intensive 8 hours. Marines were subjected to rigorous practice, performing barrel changes blindfolded while wearing cumbersome gas masks, and under conditions simulating live enemy fire until they could consistently execute the entire procedure in under 20 seconds. It is widely recognized that the post-war engineering advancements leading to the development of sophisticated quick-change barrel systems owe a direct and significant conceptual debt to pivotal battlefield incidents, such as Corporal Stein's extraordinary improvisation. Building upon these evolving tactical requirements, the M2HB model, which formally entered military service in 1945, incorporated a significantly improved barrel release mechanism. This crucial enhancement alone dramatically reduced the time required for a barrel change from a prior range of 30-45 seconds down to a more efficient 15 to 20 seconds. Further illustrating this doctrinal shift, the M60 machine gun, a formidable weapon first introduced in 1957, was conceptualized and designed from its foundational stages with the imperative of rapid barrel changes as a paramount operational requirement. For a proficient and well-drilled crew, the average time to execute a barrel change on the M60 was an impressive 8 seconds. Subsequent weapon systems, such as the M240 and M249, continued to build upon and refine this established doctrine. These modern machine guns were engineered with the explicit understanding that the barrel itself should be regarded as a consumable component, one that crews would routinely and efficiently swap out multiple times during the course of a single combat engagement to maintain sustained suppressive fire. The profound implications of rapid barrel cooling continued to fuel extensive military research efforts throughout the duration of the Cold War era. In 1954, the renowned Aberdeen Proving Ground, a premier facility for military testing and development, conducted a series of classified experiments. These tests were specifically designed to thoroughly explore and evaluate various emergency cooling methodologies for machine gun barrels. The methods under investigation included conventional substances, like water and oil, as well as more innovative approaches, such as compressed air, and notably, human urine. The outcomes of these meticulous tests provided unequivocal scientific validation for Corporal Stein's earlier empirical findings from the battlefield. The research conclusively demonstrated that liquid cooling was indeed effective, operating with remarkable speed, and, crucially, without causing detrimental damage or structural integrity issues to the barrel itself. Furthermore, these classified tests also explored the practical implementation of pre-positioning dedicated water containers at established defensive positions, specifically for the purpose of machine gun barrel cooling. This tactical innovation, directly stemming from the research, subsequently became a standard operational practice within Vietnam-era military doctrine, highlighting the enduring legacy of battlefield improvisation. Corporal Tony Stein, whose resourcefulness profoundly impacted military doctrine, bravely endured the brutal fighting on Guadalcanal and continued to serve with distinction throughout the remainder of the arduous Pacific campaign. His exceptional leadership and valor were recognized with a battlefield commission to second lieutenant at Bougainville in 1943. He then remarkably survived the harrowing and intensely destructive Battle of Peleliu in 1944, a campaign notorious for its ferocity. Stein subsequently landed with the 5th Marine Division on the volcanic black sands of Iwo Jima on February 19, 1945, participating in one of the most iconic and costly battles of the war. On that unforgiving beachhead, demonstrating unparalleled courage, Stein personally led 8 distinct charges against heavily fortified Japanese pillboxes, single-handedly neutralizing 4 enemy positions, and under relentless enemy fire, courageously evacuating numerous wounded Marines to safety. Tragically, his extraordinary service was cut short when he was killed by sniper fire on the 3rd day of the battle. In recognition of his supreme sacrifice and valor, President Harry Truman posthumously awarded him the nation's highest military decoration, the Medal of Honor. The official citation accompanying this prestigious award lauded his extraordinary heroism and conspicuous gallantry, painting a vivid picture of his bravery. However, it conspicuously omitted any specific mention of the pivotal events on Henderson Ridge, or that fateful night when he sustained continuous machine gun fire for an astonishing 10 minutes, relying solely on a profound understanding of physics, desperate improvisation, and whatever liquids were readily at hand. The venerable M2 Browning heavy machine gun, bearing the distinct serial number 324775, holds a storied place in military annals. This particular weapon, a silent witness to countless moments of intense combat, first saw action during that fateful night in 1942. Its robust construction and relentless efficiency allowed it to endure the entirety of the Second World War, subsequently continuing its distinguished service through the arduous campaigns of the Korean conflict. By the time it was finally decommissioned from active duty in 1968, this formidable piece of engineering had discharged an astonishing estimated 400,000 rounds, a testament to its enduring reliability and the ferocity of the engagements it participated in. Today, it stands as a revered artifact within the hallowed halls of the National Museum of the Marine Corps, located in Quantico, Virginia, a lasting monument to the courage and ingenuity of those who wielded it. Yet, the descriptive plaque accompanying this historic firearm, while detailing its impressive service record, conspicuously omits any mention of the ingenious, albeit unorthodox, cooling trick employed during that pivotal encounter. This omission is not accidental. It reflects a deliberate institutional preference within the Marine Corps to safeguard certain narratives, preserving them as an intimate understanding shared exclusively among its own ranks. These are the profound, often gritty insights understood by Marines who comprehend that prevailing in the maelstrom of battle frequently necessitates transcending established protocols and conventional wisdom. Such regulations, after all, were never conceived to encompass the specific, unimaginable horrors and desperate exigencies encountered on the front lines, where survival hinges on adaptability rather than strict adherence to doctrine. The brave men who valiantly defended Henderson Ridge on that perilous November night were acutely aware of this profound truth. They grasped that genuine innovation, born of extreme duress, might indeed carry an unpleasant odor or blatantly contravene official regulations, yet unequivocally serve to preserve precious lives. This raw, pragmatic wisdom, forged in the crucible of direct combat, remains conspicuously absent from any official training manual or operational guide. Nevertheless, the profound impact of such unconventional ingenuity strongly suggests its rightful place should be enshrined within the very core of military instruction, serving as a vital lesson for future generations facing their own forms of hell. Please stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic.